Well, a 7/16 spanner, or wrench for you Americans, made the supreme sacrifice. It's been somewhat thinned out, cut down this way so it'll fit in there, and it's a loose fit on there, but it certainly fits. So now I've got to see if this will actually unscrew, and it does. Miracle of miracles. That's the knob off the top. I don't know what this little biological specimen here is. Looks like a little piece of wood really. Maybe it's a fragment of leather. We'll give it the benefit of the doubt. The rewind knob. Something through the fork, and it does come loose. The top of the camera, 3 screws. Someone's bound to ask, can you repaint something like this? Yes, you can. It's a bit entertaining. Normally what you're wanting to do is get it nice and clean down to a good clean finish. Use a etch primer and a good acrylic lacquer top coat. And I've found that you can get a very good result if you oven bake the paint. Obviously you'd have to remove the finder assembly first, and you'd have to mask this before you paint it. Otherwise you'd have that would be painted. I wouldn't try and remove that. Getting it staked back in position is probably tricky. There's a lot of scarring on here. That's where the edge of this lever is rubbed up against it, and I think probably a bit of thumb pressure pushing that upwards has just rubbed it into there. However, we put that aside, get to the camera. What's in here that we need to deal with? The screw on the top of the frame counter there, you need quite a broad screwdriver blade to get in there, but it's got to be quite thin. The slots are a bit damaged looking. Normally I find I can get onto that with my steel rule. It would normally fit in there. Yeah, that's come loose. Once it's loose, you can get a screwdriver into one side of that slot and undo it. So we have a star-shaped spring cup washer under there. Stair dial and the centre screw. The rewind assembly here, that's held to the top of the casting with 3 screws. I'm removing that to clean just because the other stuff's going in the ultrasonic cleaner. I might just as well do that at the same time. At this end, we've got a washer here with a raised lip on it. The raised lip obviously goes upwards. Well, perhaps not obviously, but obviously to me. We've got a ratchet wheel here, and you can see which way the ratchet wheel moves by looking at the teeth that it engages against. And that's job is to stop you rotating the film advance. Underneath that we've got another plain washer. Well, it is a plain washer this time, it's got no lip on it. And then under that, 3 screws hold the advance shaft bush in position. Now the advance shaft, one of those screws went AWOL already. How did it do that? Never mind, we'll find that in a second. The advance shaft here in this bush should only turn one way. It shouldn't back up. Let's get it out. There's a spring on here. It's got a little bent tab on it. That tab engages with a notch here. And the idea is when you turn it in one direction, the spring tightens up so that it tightens up on the shaft and you can't rotate it. If you rotate it in the other direction, the spring is opened up and you can rotate it. That spring tab there is bent over, it's almost flattened out. So it's not doing its job anymore. And that is almost certainly been caused by someone either forcing the advance knob in the wrong direction, which is something that you can do if you're not very good at figuring out what the arrows mean. Failing to set the rewind on the top of the advance when you're wanting to rewind the film, or in this case, because we know that the rewind mechanism didn't work correctly because it had been reassembled incorrectly, chances are the damage was done after that. When someone wanted to rewind the film, set the rewind lever in the direction that should have been set to, rotated the rewind knob, and it was a wee bit stiff. In fact, it was very flaming stiff. That by the time they'd leaned on it hard enough, things were turning. Let's get those parts apart. And this piece here, this is the piece from the bottom of the advance shaft. This is the piece that this advance rewind lever couples to. And basically what happens is that you lift this out of engagement with the spool, and when it's in the other direction, this is pushed down into engagement with the spool. And so that's why getting the height, getting the correct position of this set is important. Those components look okay. Here's our take-up spool, just a metal spool. It's got quite pronounced ramps in there that catch that little dog we just looked at. And somewhere there was an extra screw here which got away, which I'll have to find later. Never mind. At the top of the camera here, what have we got? So, this lever comes in and hits the ratchet wheel and stops you being able to turn the film advance. This piece here, as you swing that across, that moves our frame counter one step each time. This lever here moves this wheel, which disengages this and allows you to wind on to the next frame. And as your film travels through the camera, it moves this wheel around so that this lever runs around the cam and drops down. This latches in on the film advance and stops the film advance turning. Let's get some things uninstalled here. So we'll start with this screw. This lever is hooked up to the spring at the top here. I'll leave the spring on the body and unhook the lever from that spring, I think. Is that going to work for me? No, it's all pretty well tied on there. See if I can get that spring off the body. Oh, that spring's not very exciting looking. It's a bit lackluster in terms of its tension. I'll have to give that some serious attention with the pliers, I think. This lever should lift off. There's no washer or anything under it. It's got a single spring here which works it, or provides tension. On the top of this shaft here, right, so we've got a single screw, fine thread, star-shaped washer, dome up to towards us. This should be 2 pieces, and it's worth watching the direction of this, because if you put it on upside down, things don't work well. So it goes that way up. Watch the direction of those notches. We had a washer in between, and then this piece, which has a gear on the bottom of it, which couples with our sprocket shaft here. This little ramp arrangement here, that's just what the lever here runs across. It provides it with a little bit of friction, and it also has a stop on it. This screw holds our bellows, the struts mechanism, into the camera. The sprocket shaft is, oh, there's that screw I'd lost earlier. The sprocket shaft is held in here, 2 screws, one here, one here. There's a washer in here that you shouldn't lose. And I will get these screws out and we'll lift that shaft right out, because the gear on the top of it's very dirty. I would much rather have it out and clean it. There are holes in the shaft that these screws run into. Just trying to figure out which one's still biting. There's this one. That's that one. There we go. Shaft out, that can go in the cleaner. These 2 components, I want the screws out of those first, because they're so small they tend to get lost there. My basket for my ultrasonic cleaner is got somewhat coarse mesh. Little pieces like that are likely to go through and could get lost. There's a washer that sat on top of the, between the body and the top of that sprocket wheel. That's that pretty much done. I'm looking at the hinge pin for the door here. There's no slot in that screw. That's weird. Don't know what's going on there. I can get the door off regardless, because you can wriggle them out with one pin in place. So we'll do that. I don't know what's happened to that top screw. Now there's a spring in here, which I'm just going to slide my scale underneath there, my rule. Right. Oh yeah, somebody's done something odd there. That's been repaired in some fashion. That is very odd looking. Okay. So at some stage in its life, it's had some fairly serious repair done there. See if we can lift this arm off here. Seems to be unusually reluctant. Okay, so there's our door. And this here, somebody's driven in a larger screw. It has distorted the door. It's bent over at a funny angle up here. That pin is not sitting in line with the edge of the door. It's got a twist on it. It's effectively going through 2 pieces of metal there, but it hasn't gone well. So that's someone's repair which is less than lovely. But having said that, that might well have been done 50 years ago. A repair that lasts 50 years without any problem isn't a bad repair. I need to remove the shutter and lens assembly here. I'm just looking at the state of the bellows here. On the pleat of the bellows at that point, there's a little rough spot. I'm going to have to check that very closely to make sure there's no light leak at that point. I might even put a patch on the inside regardless, just as insurance. It just doesn't look good. Right on that point there is it's either a notch in the leather, maybe some damage. I'm a bit concerned it could cause a light leak. I'll patch the inside of the bellows. The camera's looking pretty stripped down. Can I get the retaining ring off it? Let's try. But when they come off without a fight, that's suspiciously good luck. I'll put that retainer ring there. That retainer ring's had a hard life. It's obviously been in once or twice before. In the camera, here we have, it's getting down to it now. So our focus scouring. This camera, the focus is effectively frozen. I'm looking to see what marks have been made, the alignment marks that somebody might have made when they were assembling the camera or repairing the camera. I'm looking to see if there is one. It looks like a tiny mark there on that ring right by that screw head. There's certainly enough scarring on here for me to tell where the screws go through that. I'll just put a mark on the outer helical at that screw head there. Now put a little arrow head there so I know exactly where that goes. And knowing that, I can get my focus scale ring back correctly placed to the outer helical. These struts do not want to stay popped up in position. They're loose and they're wobbly. They're certainly not good. See if I can get these screws loose. They're not hanging on by much, they're very short. And this is painted, so I'm not going to put that through the cleaner. Right, moving on from here. 4 screws down here hold the bellows to the back of the front standard. And that was the bellows falling away back into the body, so they're good. 4 screws here hold the focus mount to the back of the front standard. There is no front retainer ring on the focus mount. The front standard does that job. I'll just recover those 4 screws. Here's our mount. Let's have those 4 screws out that held the bellows in place. Okay. There's a notch in the top of this mount here. It's only present on one side, and I'm fairly sure that the side it's present is the top. That would be right. So the outer helical, first I'm going to mark my inner and outer helical if I can. Normally I want to get them at the same height relative to each other, so I know exactly where I'm putting things back. It's a bit hard to judge on this one because we've only got a little edge there showing. The outer helical is slightly high, and this of course is stuck, so it's a bit reluctant to play the game. Let me put a bit of solvent on here. That was just a bit of naphtha. Just like to loosen that thread up slightly so I can rotate this. That's better. What I want to do is get the inner and outer at the same height so that I can mark across them. And then when I put it back together I can get them in the correct position relative to each other. That is really, really gummed up. The grease there is just hardened up. It's just gone like concrete. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's close enough. So I had my little mark there. So I'll put a mark there next to it. And the outer helical should unscrew from the mount. And it does. In the inner helical, yeah, sort of, I can fight that off there. That's really just nasty, thick, nasty grease. This piece I'm not going to put through the ultrasonic because I'll have to remove the felt first, and that's likely to fall to pieces if I try and do that. So we'll clean that manually. Brings us back to the camera body. So we've got 4 screws holding the struts into the camera body. One is hiding there underneath that bit of glue. And I already know these struts are bent. One lives here, I think it's that screw. That's bent. Well, that's going in wobbly. There's something odd about that screw. Or it was not in at all. That's weird.